bit of a different site today, as we are now live with GoFAST Racing here for one of their Monday night races. A league that I will be doing some commentary with later on in the month. Next week is their preseason in lieu of the TRC Wednesday and Sunday series. I am racing with TRC on Wednesdays, but they do not have a Sunday championship going, so I will be racing with them during that time. But here we are tonight, just getting through with free practice. It is obviously very rainy here at Donington Park. And things may be a little bit shaky. It's first time streaming with GoFAST Racing here. Let's make sure that my audio is good. Give me just 1 second as we get kicked over to qualifying here. Audio is good, and it is still definitely raining here in qualifying, as we have a mix of GT3 and GT4 cars out here on track. Quite a few of the GT4 Camaro out there. As we are now on board with Miska in the Camaro GT4. But yes, welcome in. This is a new league that I will be doing some commentary with, and they have said that they have some pretty fast drivers in this league, so we will see how that stands up today. Here in qualifying, still definitely raining, and it is heavy rain here at Donington Park. As everyone is getting through on their outlap, it looks to be Ouroboros first on the flying lap when he comes around the final hairpin here, heading back to the pit straight. And as Ouroboros comes across the line, will be the first to start a flying lap here in GT4, coming out of turn 1 of Redgate. Very long, forever right-hander. Late apex as well to try and get that car set up for the exit through the S's of turns 2, 3, up into turn 4, the old hairpin. Definitely a corner that can catch drivers out here in the wet, as it is uphill with a curb on the inside that you need to push a lot of speed through to make it through the double left-hand kinks of Starkey's Bridge. As you head back up the hill towards McLean's, a long left-hander, a lot of grip to be had there, but you need to get the car set up right on the entry. And then the right-hander of Coppice, which gives you the short straight of Starkey's Straight before we get to the very tight S's chicane. Very tight. You will see the cars slowing down very much into the S's chicane right here, as Ouroboros will be the first one to show us, taking a lot of the curb on the inside, and I do suspect that that black tire barrier on the side will be gone by the time this qualifying session is over. And as Ouroboros brings us to the first of 2 hairpins to close out this lap, the first one being Melbourne. As we come out of Melbourne, exit very crucial, both entry and exit, extremely crucial. And then getting on the brakes downhill for the entry into Goddard's, the final hairpin for the lap, to complete the lap as you hang that car out wide and come across the line to finish your lap. Ouroboros setting the time in GT4 with a 1:41.6. No GT3s have set lap times yet as the rest of the field starts their way through. Marvy, the first of the GT3s to set their lap time with that Aston Martin GT3 in that nice bright light blue and British Racing green with a little bit of orange on there, looking like a true Aston Martin. A little bit of Gulf inspiration there. Ricky Bobby in the Porsche, I believe the 992 GT3R, that it would be in second place in GT3 as of right now. Ouroboros still at the top of the leaderboards in GT4s. A few more GT4s start to cycle their way through and set their lap times. Currently in the wet, about almost a 4-second difference between the GT4 lap times and the GT3 lap times. Very, very small margins compared to what you would usually see between GT3s and GT4s, right there around 10 seconds per lap on a normal track. Marvy currently the GT3 pole sitter, with Ricky Bobby just 3/4 of a second behind, and Ouroboros still in the lead in GT4 by about 9/10 of a second over Ormiston. And as the driver's out here trying to displace some of that water, Marvy pulling off to the inside to, I believe, either change the setup or get some fresh wets on that car. So we have a few GT4 still in the pits, not coming out to set their laps. Car number 34 of Ingham in the Audi GT3 Evo, coming out of Redgate now, heading up through the curves, up into the old hairpin. Going to be very interesting. The track will develop as the qualifying session goes on. There is a lot of water to be displaced on the track here, but it has not been displaced that much yet. We are starting to see some of the very early showings of the dry line, or the wet line as it would be called, as it is definitely not going to be dry out there one bit. Wets are the tire to be on 100%. As we're riding along with Ingham coming out of Coppice down to the Starkey Straight, heading towards the S's chicane. Very, very tricky chicane for these cars, especially GT3s and GT4s. Getting down the gears on the brakes, trying not to invalidate. Very easy to invalidate the lap there, going too far over the curb. As the rain is definitely still coming down. Marvy is still the leading GT3, still in the pits. Yaldara in the McLaren 720S GT3 coming out of Coppice, less than half a second behind the time of Marvy, displacing Ricky Bobby down to third, and then Nate in the McLaren 720S as well. 1.5 seconds off of the leading pace of Marvy, but on a lap here that may be able to improve that pace slightly. Ouroboros still the leading GT4, as Ormiston still in P2, and when Ingham comes to complete their lap, should be an improvement ahead of the GT4 lap times. Quite a large array of cars out here on track. We've got Lamborghini, McLaren, Porsche, some of the Chevys in the GT4 class. Sadly, the only Chevy that is available in Assetto Corsa Competizione. Would love to see the Corvette C8 Z06 GT3R, but I don't think that we will get the chance. And as we are just passing the halfway point here in this qualifying session, Ricky Bobby now the leading car in GT3, currently on the overall pole with a 136.8 here in the wet. As that track is developing, the times will come down. The wets will start to gain temperature better with that water displaced out on track, and that will ultimately offer more grip. Marvy now a second off the pace, back out of the pit lane, needing to improve. Will have a few laps to do so. Yaldara also out there looking to improve, coming down to the S's now. Yakashokas in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo, out looking to set a valid lap. Same with Profit in the McLaren 720S GT3 behind. Slapshot in the McLaren GT4 still in the pit lane. Same with Giant in the Cayman GT4. Ouroboros, the GT4 pole sitter, still in the pit lane. I believe having done the work required to hold on to that pole, at least as far as he believes, or as far as they believe. Ricky Bobby, your current pole sitter in the pit lane, as Marvy out trying to find the time, will not find it on this lap, going off the track at the old hairpin. A very tricky section, especially in the wet. An uphill right-hander that kind of catches you off guard. Actually, that was not the old hairpin. That was actually, that was McLean. Still a very similar corner to the old hairpin in terms of how it looks on track. But not much camber out there. Very flat parts of the track. Easy to get caught out if you are not on top of your game, especially here in the wet. A little over 5 minutes left here in qualifying as Yakashokas now bumps up to third, displacing Yaldara down a spot into fourth, and still in the second row, but outside of the podium positions currently. Still less than 5 minutes left in this qualifying session. Still plenty of movement to happen. Ricky Bobby still in the pit lane, I believe, thinking that they've got enough in terms of lap time for pole position. Marvy still out there looking to improve. Yaldara just a couple hundredths of a second behind in P3. Yakashokas now down to P4. Still looking to improve on a valid lap. We'll have a couple more tries, as we have about a minute and a half per lap here, as long as the times don't come down too drastically, but I don't believe they would. We've got about 2 or 3 laps left, depending on where you're at on track. Yakashoka seeming to get a poor exit out of the Melbourne hairpin, or just prioritizing the better line to get a good flying lap. Ricky Bobby still in the pit lane. Marvy still out trying to improve on a valid lap and still pushing. But only a couple more laps left to attempt that pole position lap. Yaldara still just a couple hundredths behind, as Yaldara is awaiting for some clean track to hop out and get that lap going, but jumps in front of some traffic, being the 296 of Cabe. Cash Money Cabe. And 296 of Cash Money Cabe hopping back out on track with those Belgian colors on there. Ricky Bobby still your pole sitter. Marvy looking to improve, did not improve on that last lap. We'll have this one and one more to try to improve if he can. Yaldara also looking to improve, coming through McLean now. Up the hill towards Coppice, with a little bit of GT4 traffic ahead, could become a hindrance. If not on this lap, on the next lap, it's going to have to be everything from Yaldara, as it's this one and one more. As long as Yaldara can make it around the track on the next lap very, very quickly, I don't know if they would have enough time to start another lap. Yaldara is slowing down, building some space between them and the GT4s ahead to try and buy some space on track, try and get some open air. Langley now up into P2 in the BMW, pushing both Marvy and Yaldara down a spot. Yakashoka is now onto the third row, as Langley also still in the pits. I think Langley and Ricky Bobby both believe that they have done enough work to solidify their positions on track. Marvy, Yaldara, and Yakashokas. Actually, Yakashokas has now gone to the pit lane. It's just Marvy and Yaldara, as well as Cabe, out on track trying to improve. Yaldara may have enough time. Yaldara would not have enough time to get back around on track to start another lap before the session is over. Cabe should be able to get this lap and one more before the session comes to a close. And Marvy should be able to get this lap and one more. It would be very tight for the GT3s ahead of Yaldara and Cabe to see if they can get another lap in. In GT4, Ouroboros still your leader, with Ormiston, Aramich, and Miska all attempting to displace Ouroboros in GT4. They will all have one lap left. Ormiston coming across the line now. Coming up into Redfield. All on their own. Plenty of clean air out on track. If you were going to set your fastest lap, the track has developed the most, but the rain is still coming down and there are not as many cars on track. The dry line is not going to be there like it was, and it will be rapidly depleting as the majority of the field is back in the pit lane. Car number 25 of Christ QC was out there, but quickly invalidated the lap. Marvy, also on an invalid lap, will not be able to improve. At least it may be the glitch showing that Marvy is on an invalid lap. They may be on a valid lap. Yaldara in the pit lane. Marvy, now the sole survivor left in GT3 qualifying to try and displace either of the two cars in front of him in terms of pace for the pole position in GT3. Ouroboros still holding on to the pole in GT4 with Ormiston. Ormiston was out on track, no longer out on track. Car number 999 of Miska looking to improve in that Camaro. And then car number 305 of Your Mom also looking to improve, coming out of Starkey's Bridge up into McLean. Marvy must still be on a flying lap. Pushing on this lap. Just a couple corners left to go. The square double right-hander of Melbourne into the seemingly sort of open hairpin of Goddard's up ahead to complete the lap. The rear tires of that car, you can see that car squirming all the way up the hill. We will see if it will be an improvement here as Marvy comes across the line. Not going to be an improvement, directly off into the pit lane. And now the sole survivor out on track is going to be Your Mom in the Camaro GT4, but will pull off to the left-hand side of the track, and that will bring it into the qualifying session. In GT3, Ricky Bobby is your pole sitter, your overall pole sitter, and your GT3 pole sitter. 36.8 was the time to beat in GT3, with Langley in P2 with a 37.2, Marvy in P3, Yaldara P4, Yakashokas P5, Prophet P6, Dingham P7, Cash Money Cabe P8, Nate P9, and Christ QC P10. In GT4, it was a much closer battle. Ouroboros in P1 with a 40.7. Then in second place, Ormiston just 0.6 off with Aramich P3, Miska P4, Your Mom P5, Brute P6, Mad Psycaster P7, Brad P8, Peach P9, Slapshot P10, and Giant P11. As we get ready to start, the grid is formed up on the grid. Formed up on track, and we have about a minute and a half before we get engines fired here. As we will go on board shortly here. As we will get on board with our pole sitter, Ricky Bobby. You can see they do not have the cars fired up yet, so you aren't going to have those windshield wipers, and as they're making their final adjustments to the setup, that's going to be that bouncing that you'll see. Making sure that the setup is correct. We've got a 45-minute race here at Donington Park. Conditions expected to hold for the time being. It will be wet at the start, and it will be wet for a while. It will take a lap or two for us to get this track cleaned off, displace some of that water, and start developing that dry line. So the first couple laps here will be very, very sketchy, especially if you don't have too much experience when it comes to wet weather racing. But shouldn't be too much. We will be displacing a little bit of that water on the formation lap here. It'll be a full formation lap. You'll start to see some weaving, some generating tire warmth, some dragging of the brakes, trying to get those brakes warm as well. What that does is makes the brakes more bendable, allows them to slow the car down more effectively, especially at the start of the race where you want your brakes to be the best. And as we are about 1 second away, as Ricky Bobby will fire up the engine in this Porsche 992 GT3R here very shortly, and we'll kick those wipers on, hopefully. There go those windshield wipers. Now we can see getting those streaks of rain off the windshield. And we'll be on board with Ricky Bobby to lead us off the line for the first time with GoFAST Racing here. This is just one of their fun races. The official season starts with the preseason race next week, next Monday, same time as today, and then the week after that will be the official start of Season 3 in the GoFAST Racing League. As we are now off the line with Ricky Bobby and letting that flat 6, naturally aspirated flat 6 in that Porsche 992 GT3R scream. And you can see those rooster tails as the field gets riled up and we start getting these cars off the line. Definitely a wide variety of colors out here on track. As the field is going to be coming through the curves. You start to see some dragging of the brakes, especially here in the wet. Tire temperature and brake temperature is going to be crucial. They do have the setups catered towards them in terms of the brake ducts and tire pressures, but you want to have those tires as warm as you can get them by the time you get to the start-finish line. The best thing that you can do is have that car as close to its peak performance when you get ready to start this race. 45-minute race here at Donington Park. There is a one mandatory stop, indicated by that orange number 1 that you see down on the leaderboard in the bottom left-hand side. It is a mandatory stop for tires and fuel. There is no pit window. That stop must be taken, otherwise you will receive a very hefty penalty. And as Ricky Bobby leads the field to Starkey Straight, as we head down towards the S's, Langley in that pig-nosed BMW definitely showing the pace. A late contender in qualifying, jumping up into the second place very, very late into the session. And as we get the 2x2 call here very shortly, grid will form up for the race start. Now we go 2x2, and as the field forms up into their respective positions, we will get this race started. Green flag very shortly, as soon as we get back to the start-finish line. And Ricky Bobby will lead the field to the green flag as we come out of Goddard's, the hairpin just before the pit straight. Not much of that water has been dissipated, and it is definitely still raining out here. But as we head down the hill towards the start-finish line, we're about to take the green flag for the first time tonight.
Green light.
And green, 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 we are racing here in the GoFAST Racing League. Ricky Bobby holding station very early, but a starting infringement will give Ricky Bobby a penalty at the very start, and then a very unfortunate start for Ricky Bobby. Some heavy contact at the start as the rest of the field will try to cycle their way through. Seems to be contact all the way through. Yaldara and Ricky Bobby both involved in that incident. Ricky Bobby also having to deal with that drive-through penalty for that starting infringement. We also had a GT4 skipping across the field as Marvy finds himself up in P1 with Yakashokis in tow. And Ingham as well in that Audi, but the field is all jumbled up. Miska, the leading GT4, I say the leading GT4, Ormiston in the pits right now. And Marvy leading the field. He's found himself in the lead after that unfortunate contact with your pole sitter and race leaders. And as the field cycles through and the timing boards get updated, Marvy very quickly under attack from Yakashokis and that Lamborghini. Marvy desperately needing this track to develop. That Lamborghini is going to be a much more handling car over that Aston Martin, but the Aston Martin is very quick, as Yakashok is definitely posing a threat early against the GT3 of Marvy. Ingham also looking to find his way onto the back of this fight. Miska in the GT4 sneakily making his way up through the field very early in this race. We'll now have some GT3s that will try to cycle their way through, as Langley, the second place driver, down in P5 in GT3, will have to cycle his way up through, actually in P6 in GT3. Ricky Bobby serving that drive-through penalty early, but will not count as the required pit stop, as Profit goes exit stage left and has left the course, I believe, just getting onto that outside curb when the wet. The track has not developed too much, and that has sent the car off the track. Marvy, still your leader, growing a slight gap to Yakashokis behind. Yakashokis now potentially under attack from Ingham in the Audi. Two mid-engine V10s that share a motor, as Ingham has definitely closed up a lot of ground on Yakashokis. We may have a battle here very shortly. As Yakashokis goes wide, Ingham assumes second place in GT3, and the stars align for Ingham, moving up very many positions early on into this race, finding himself in P2. Yakashokis just trying to find the pace in that Lamborghini. Showed some pace early on, just trying to get that pace back. Miska now finding himself among the GT3s, much further along than they expected to be, especially in a multi-class race, and Langley has broken free of those GT3s behind, now up into P4 in GT3, and is looking to chase down the leading GT3s. Marvy has grown a large gap to the cars behind, 3.5 seconds currently, and Langley closing down on the GT4 of Miska that he will have to get through before he can get onto the back of the podium GT3s. Your mom and Ouroboros having a battle here in GT4 as they come through Goddard side by side as they come down the pit straight. Side by side just behind them, the 296 and 720S of Cash Money and Yaldara. In GT4, Ouroboros just sneaking out, going around the outside of Your Mom, and then as we head through turn 2, then up into the curves, there's going to be battles all the way through as the traffic tries their best to cycle through. As the track develops, those GT3s will develop more pace, but very early on, the GT4s seem to have a little bit of an advantage out on track. Yaldara going around the outside of Your Mom at the old hairpin. Very tricky spot to go around the outside, but that GT3 showing its better pace with the higher horsepower and more aerodynamic technology on that car, able to easily drive past the GT4's Cash Money, and the 296 also trying to get past this Camaro GT4 before they get too coppish, as that Camaro leaves the space for Cash Money on the inside. There is no reason to fight that. That car has much more pace than the GT4. Just ahead on track as they come into the Melbourne hairpin, Ingham now fully under attack from Yakashokis, and this battle will just open the doors for Langley to find his way into this battle very, very shortly. The longer they fight, the further away that Marvy is able to pull away. Now, Langley did out-qualify Marvy, but it will have to be excellent pace and an excellent pit stop to keep Langley at bay. Just 5 seconds behind, that is one mistake. It'll have to be a perfect race from either driver if they are going to try and displace one another for position. Miska, the current GT4 leader, Ouroboros now behind Yaldara in the 720S GT3, is displacing them as the timing boards update, and Yaldara taking the fastest lap of the race here about 4 laps in. As the field is cycling through a large group of GT4s, all the way from the P3 GT4 of Your Mom all the way back to the what would that would be the P8 GT4, the P3 GT4 of Your Mom all the way back to the P4 GT4 of Peach, as Profit and the McLaren trying to cycle their way through the GT4 field. Definitely a tall order, especially here in the wet. And as Marvy is expanding their lead, Ingham now slightly breaking free of Yakashokis, but Yakashokis is in the slipstream, going very deep into the S's chicane though, and that will open the door for Langley, just inching ever so much closer to this GT3 podium fight. Miska still in a league of their own in GT4 all the way out front, as the 720S of Yaldara looks to cycle through the GT4 field shortly. As Yaldara in the McLaren GT3 will pull to the inside once they get to the pit straight and should have the speed to get past the Camaro GT4 of Miska. Yaldara pulling a little bit of that slipstream, but does not seem to be able to catch that Camaro GT4. Now Yaldara going for the inside of Miska at Redfield. Miska still the leader in GT4s, actually got the cutback, the old switcheroo on the GT4. An interclass battle here between Miska and Yaldara. A little bit risky, as that McLaren 720S is the overall faster car. I think Miska is just trying to open the door for Yaldara to go by, but also to allow, or try and not hinder their own pace, but just want Yaldara to get the move on and get on with it. Miska will not sacrifice any time or pace for Yaldara, and it seems to be that Miska will push forward regardless of the task at hand. Ingham off the track at the exit of Coppice and pulling over, I believe, to let the field cycle through. That does put Langley up into P3 all over the rear of Yakashokis, as Langley sets up on the outside of the Melbourne hairpin, looking to maybe set up the double cut overtake here between Melbourne and Goddard's. Langley a little flash of the lights as they head down to Goddard's, not close enough for the move there, but Yakashokis does go a little bit wide. That does give Langley a better exit of Goddard's. Now Yakashokis going defensive, forcing Langley to try the outside. Langley dives back to the inside here up at turn number 1, not close enough for the move there. We'll have to wait and try again. It will be a little while before he gets another chance, but Yakashokis makes a move, or makes a mistake at the exit of turn 2, and it looked like they were going to be side by side through the curves for a second. Langley will just have to tuck behind and wait their chance to get past the Lamborghini, the P2 Lamborghini of Yakashokis. Miska now with Yaldara finally getting some pace gathered in that McLaren 720S. Now Cash Money K will be the next GT3 to cycle past the GT4 of Miska. Marvy still on a league of their own. The gap between P1 and P2 now 7 seconds, as Langley all over the rear of Yakashokis. This move is coming very shortly, but when will it be coming? That is the greatest question, as we will go on board with Langley, hopefully to get this move here very shortly. Definitely in the spray and eyeing the inside, not close enough for the move. Will break around to the outside, try and set up the switcheroo as they head into the Goddard's hairpin. Coming out of Melbourne hairpin was almost close, but not close enough. It will have to be a late move on the brakes into Goddard's, but once again will not be the move that Langley is looking for as we come out of Goddard's onto the pit straight, down the hill in that slipstream, but not in it enough to keep that car, or to get past using slipstream. Just trying to set up the better exit of Redfield. It is a good exit, but still nowhere to overtake until maybe you get all the way up to the right-hander of McLean. Very, very tight all the way through here. One thing to remember, these tracks were built for bikes, not for cars, but they have been adapted for cars, as Yakashokis goes wide at the exit of the old hairpin, and now Langley is in clean air all on their own, looking to run down the Aston Martin GT3 of Marvy up ahead. That gap dropping rapidly Was around 7 seconds between Yakashokis. Now was less than 6 seconds for a slight moment. Langley now definitely on the prowl, looking for the rear end of that Aston Martin ahead. Can barely see him up ahead. Hard on the brakes down into the S chicane. Marvey still out ahead, but that gap is dropping between Langley and Marvey as we approach the pit window. I would expect to start seeing some pit stops around the halfway point of this lap. The pit entry is after the exit of the Goddard's hairpin. And car number 12 of Profit around between McLean and Coppice, trying to get that McLaren righted and back out on track. Car number 999 of Miska was out all on their own, but Ouroboros has found the Camaro of Miska, and this is going to be a battle for the lead in GT4. Miska going very, very wide, almost 2 tires on the grass at the outside of the track at the entry into Redfield. And Ouroboros all over the rear bumper of Miska as they head through the curves up to the old hairpin. And it is definitely going to be a big fight, but as we approach the pit window, as Cash Money went very, very deep into the old hairpin, goes off the track, and that does give the space back to Ingham. Ingham looking to move back forward in the GT3 positions. Makes it past Cade. That does put them in P4 in GT3. Still quite a ways to get onto the podium in GT3. Miska all over the track at the exit of Coppice, full opposite lock, sliding the car, and that will allow Ouroboros to get alongside as they head down to the S's, but there's not really an overtake there. Hard on the brakes. It's a reverse drag race, seeing who can slow down the fastest. Miska had the track position, was able to get the brakes on that car locked down, and had the inside. Ouroboros would have had to just turn through Miska, and he wasn't able to do that. Miska still ahead, survives another lap, but Ouroboros definitely showing speed in that McLaren. And Miska will just have to hold on to this lead as long as they can. The gap between Marvey and Langley has shrunk quite a bit. I don't know if maybe there was a mistake from Marvey. Actually, I say that the gap has shrunk. The gap is actually in the negatives. Langley has found himself ahead of Marvey. I think it may have been a mistake. Langley in the lead of this race. Definitely showing dominant pace so far. As Langley in that pink pig, if you will, BMW with the next generation nose. Well, I am not personally a fan of. I do prefer the previous generation of BMW noses, or snouts, however you would like to classify them. Still in GT4, a big, big battle for the GT4 lead between Miska and Ouroboros. The same move once again, the drag race on the brakes. And Miska still holding the advantage. It's an absolutely incredible defense from Miska, especially wrangling around that high horsepower Camaro GT4, that ZL1 1LE GT4. But Miska is caught out at the Melbourne hairpin. Will have the inside, the defensive line into Goddard as long as they can keep the speed there. And Miska able to cover off the front. Ouroboros looking for the switchback. Miska goes deep. Ouroboros will have the inside line, but will not have the preferred line heading down into turn 1. Ouroboros will have to tuck behind. It could be a late dive bomb into turn 1, and Ouroboros looks to set that move up as they head down into turn 1. Ouroboros very, very narrow to the inside, but allows the GT3 of Ingham to go through. I don't know if maybe there was some communication between those two drivers there, but Miska is still in the lead of this race. Yaldara now all over the rear of Marvy. I think Marvy has made a couple mistakes. Dropping out of the podium, was in a dominant position leading this race. And now Marvy, I think, just succumbing to the elements. Down in P3, almost outside of the podium if Yaldara gets by. Langley now catching some lap traffic in GT3, the 720S of Nate. With Yakashokis just behind, still showing good pace in that car after that going off at Coppice. And as we approach the pit window, when will we start to see our first pit stops of the race? It is not yet. Actually, as the 427 of Nate comes into the pit lane, looks to be one of our first takers. We also have Giant in the pit lane in GT4, but they had, I believe, started this race in the pit lane. Nate is our first true taker. I guess Ormiston would be our first true taker. I'm not sure if that was necessarily by choice, as they are 2 laps down. It may have been to repair some damage. Nate in the pit lane was still on the lead lap for a short amount of time, as Langley also looking to catch some more back markers in GT3. The 12 of Profit, and then the 25 of Christ QC. Yakashokis still on the rear of this fight. And Marvy and Yaldara definitely locked in battle. Marvy trying desperately to hold on to this podium. Maybe that Aston Martin reached a fall-off point in terms of grip. And we would expect to see our pit stops for the leaders here very, very shortly. Miska still in the lead in GT4 with Ingham in that Aston Martin GT3 Evo just behind. Miska sliding that car all the way through, full opposite lock coming out of Coppice, heading down onto the Starkey Straight. And Langley still staying out. Who will be our first taker of the leaders? No one going for the pit strategy yet. Peach, the GT4, and Brute as well in the pit lane. Car number 34 of Ingham off the track momentarily. Does get that car wrangled back down. Miska and Ouroboros locked in battle once more. Ouroboros just sitting behind, going, maybe attempting, thinking about the late move into the Goddard's hairpin. And neither driver opting for the pit strategy yet. It's definitely a hot fight here in GT4. Miska and Ouroboros, the battle of the night so far. As I believe we will go on board once again with Miska, this time looking backwards at the chasing Ouroboros as we come through the old hairpin, and we hear this Camaro Z01 GT4R scream up the hill through Starkey's Bridge. And that McLaren definitely showing a little bit of a handling advantage as they come out of McLean and head down into Coppice. Ouroboros eyeing the move into Coppice, was not close enough for it there. That Camaro exercising its greater power, but Ouroboros is fully in the slipstream here, but nowhere to go, unable to get the overtake set up as they head down to the S's chicane. Back on the throttle early, a little bit of counter steer, trying to keep the tail end of that Camaro GT4 straight. And then hard on the brakes once more down to the Melbourne hairpin. Ouroboros wants to move, wants to get it done, but unable to, almost making contact with the rear quarter panel of Miska. And side by side as they head down to the Goddard's hairpin, as pit stops have begun. Langley, your race leader in the pit lane, the first taker of the leaders. It is a mandatory stop, and almost halfway through this race, Langley now rolling, coming out of the pit lane. Just needs to be a perfect stop from Langley. Cannot afford a penalty. as Langley comes out of the pits. It is a clean stop. No penalty for Langley. Everything is good to go, and now it is just head down from here on out, as he is now cycled into the breadth of the GT4 field with Aramich and that Aston Martin GT4 up ahead. Ouroboros now past Miska as Miska went into the pit lane. Miska taking the strategic advantage, going for the undercut here. I am not sure if the undercut is a strong move here at Donington Park. But Miska coming out of the pit lane now on an alternate strategy to Ouroboros. Does Ouroboros come in reactively, or does Ouroboros try to push that pace, push that run further on? Miska did not clear the pit stop requirement. I believe they may not have taken tires, and that's going to be an absolute heartbreaker for Miska, as I believe they're going to have to come back into the pit lane. It could be an error with the timing board, so we'll have to see once he comes back across the line or if he dives back into the pit lane. But if so, that would all but guarantee Ouroboros the victory here in GT4. As Miska pulls off and returns to the garage, knowing that their race is over, I believe. Yakashok is still your leader, as Miska puts that car on the trailer, knowing that the race would be over from there. We get the official halfway call from race control, as Yaldara pushing very hard on that McLaren 720S to close up on the rear of the Lamborghini of Yakashokis. Yakashokis showing to be a formidable force in GT3, currently in the lead. Ouroboros now pretty much all on their own. The GT4 Brute that you saw behind is a lap car on an opposite strategy, having already pit, as Ouroboros will have a comfortable margin to come into the pits very shortly. Your mom with Aramich all over the rear. A good battle here for the GT4 podium. There is a large gap between this battle and the GT4 leader of Ouroboros. As Ricky Bobby, the Porsche GT3 goes around and the field cycles through, trying their best to avoid that Porsche. And I believe the majority of the field does avoid the Porsche. That was your pole sitter, with some unfortunate luck. Falling down the order, was involved in an early incident, opted to stay out, did not repair that car early on, and now an unfortunate spin halfway through the race, and it will be very hard to recover for Ricky Bobby. Currently sitting just outside of the podium by one spot, but will be on a different strategy than the rest of the field. Yakashokis still your leader in GT3. Marvy, the second place GT3, if you will, if you count the pit lane entries. Aramich and Mad Psycaster come into the pit lane to get their stops completed, as they are both rolling into the pit box. I believe are sharing a pit box there, as maybe Psycaster having some trouble getting that car onto the jacks. Those two, the next to come into pit lane, the next to get their stops done. Surprisingly, not very many pit stops completed this far in the race. We are over the halfway point, as Yaldara also having not pit as well as Yakashokis. The two current leading GT3s still yet to pit, and the locked-in battle, all that does is close that gap to Langley and give Langley more track position. As the longer they battle, the slower they go, the smaller the gap to Langley gets. Langley about half a track behind, but on a different strategy, having already completed their pit stop. Aramich and Psycaster coming out of the pit lane, as Peach currently in the pit lane. as I believe Peach is getting their stop completed. Hopping on with Christ QC in the Mustang. A little bit of an off there just before McLean, but keeping that car under control as Mad Scicaster, the Porsche Cayman GT4, cycles their way through. Profit in the McLaren 720S GT3, some damage on the front of that car, also yet to pit. And Ricky Bobby now finally dives into the pit lane to get their stop started. Same with Your Mom in the Camaro GT4. Miska went early with the stop. Your Mom was closing the gap. And Ouroboros still yet to pit. Currently the GT4 leader and on a good run here so far. Will need to pit shortly. Or I guess does not need to pit. They can go the whole race as long as they pit before the end. Yaldara, the P2 GT3, now pulling into the pit lane. As Yakashokas left all on their own. Clean track to push, push, push. Almost no one in front. A large gap to the next GT3 of Langley, but Langley has completed their stop. And Langley just pushing from here to the end. Will be on older tires than the rest of the field. One of the earlier GT3s to make their stop. Bit of a strategic call. Ricky Bobby coming out of the pit lane now, having completed their stop. And Yakashokas still your leader in GT3, also still yet to complete their stop. But have they grown a gap? Have they grown enough of a gap to not fall behind to Langley whenever they do make their pit stop? Expect them any moment now to come into the pit lane, but do not expect the rain to stop one bit. It is wet to the end. As just Brad, the P2 GT4, now coming into the pit lane, but I believe will be cycled through very shortly as Aero Mitch and Mad Scicaster, Your Mom, and Brute will cycle their way through. Your Mom onto the back end of Mad Scicaster and Aero Mitch. As they now cycle through, the 242 Camaro GT4 will be cycled down the order as the leaders assume their spot on track. Ouroboros still out on track, and now with almost a full lap of buffer as he was just behind the GT4s, the podium GT4s. Ouroboros now taking their pit stop. Would be interesting to see if they opt to repair that damage, and some cars sitting where Ouroboros' box would be, maybe making it a little bit difficult to find the box. Ouroboros, the GT4 leader, in the pit lane. Yakashokas, the GT3 leader, now coming out of the pit lane and does not assume the GT3 lead. Langley now takes that lead back, albeit by not a huge margin. Yakashokas will be a couple corners behind, but it should be Langley's race to lose from here on out. Ouroboros now coming out of the pit lane. As Cabe comes into the pit lane, and Yaldara coming back into the pit lane. I don't know if maybe they messed up the pit or not, but they had already coming in once more, maybe to park the car. That would be huge in GT3, as that would bump Ingham up a spot. That would bump the entire GT3 field up a spot. Cabe now coming out of the pit lane, but another pit failure, and that will mean that Cabe will have to come back into the pit lane, as they did not meet the mandatory pit stop requirements of tires and fuel. And that is going to be essentially a day over for Cabe, as they will have to come back into the pit lane and pretty much assume that they will be losing positions in doing so. Langley, your leader in GT3, Profit diving into the pit lane in the background. Yakashokas P2, Marvy P3, Ouroboros P1 in GT4, Ingham P4 in GT3, Cabe currently P5 in GT3, but will have to come back into the pit lane. Aeromich, Psycaster, as Aeromich has actually grown a pretty sizable gap to the GT4s behind. Aeromich currently P2 in GT4. And as Your Mom is looking to cycle past the Mustang GT3 of Christ QC, as Brad and Your Mom will now be doing battle, as those checkerboard liveried Camaro GT4s come down to the S's chicane. Christ QC does go deep, threading the needle between those Camaro GT4s. And now the GT4s ought to be in some clean air, not dealing with any traffic. Profit now coming out of the pit lane. Peach still in the pit lane. Nate yet to pit with just under 13 minutes left in this race, as Nate will now pull off into the pit lane. And Christ QC will also have to pit very shortly. Cash Money Cabe will have to re-enter the pit lane. Does not opt to do so on this lap. Maybe we'll take the finish penalty. I believe it's a 30-second time penalty added on to the time at the end of the race. As Cabe goes wide, was full opposite lock in that Ferrari 296, was somehow able to keep it on track, but making contact with Profit, the McLaren 720S GT3. I believe it may have been an unsafe re-entry onto the track from one, or just not expecting the re-entry from Profit, but unfortunate contact, especially this late in the race in GT3. Ouroboros still your leader in GT4 with a sizable gap to the next cars in contention. Langley still your leader in GT3. Now coming up to the lap traffic of Profit and Christ QC. Just needing to navigate this traffic very, very easily. Very easy to get maybe some unfortunate contact that you are not looking for, as Langley now makes it past the 720S of Profit and is working on to the back of the Mustang GT3 of Christ QC. They will be getting blue flags, so they understand that the faster car is coming behind. It's Aeromich and P2 seemingly on their own. Psycaster in P3, and then Your Mom also cycling through on their own. The pole-sitting Porsche of Ricky Bobby looking to make their way back up the order, currently sitting in P5 in GT3. But these GT4s definitely showing some pace in the wet compared to the GT3s. And as we approach just 10 minutes left in this race, your leader, Langley, moving forward, getting past some of that lap traffic, both in class and out of class. Coming through the old hairpin up towards Starkey's Bridge. As Yakashokas, the gap growing, but still in a very comfortable P2. Does go off the track at the curves though, and goes wide. Overshoots the exit, or I guess overshoots the entry, goes wide at the exit of the old hairpin, now with dirty tires, especially muddy tires. We'll just have to drive that car very easily to try and hold on to that position. Yaldara with the fastest lap once again, but having to step out of the pit strategy to, I believe, either repair some damage or something on that car. Maybe did not put enough fuel in it. Did have to re-enter the pit lane, so where this would be a battle for position, no longer is a battle for position. Langley now moving past some more GT4 traffic. Yakashokas and Yaldara going side by side in what used to be a battle for position, now is no longer. And the rain has continued to pour down, and the rain seems to be coming down even harder as it is sheeting across the track. That dry line is still there, but I believe the track may start to be getting a little bit flooded. The dry line is not as visible as it used to be. Marvy currently in P3. Ingham quite a far behind the next car in contention in GT3. Ouroboros all on their own in GT4. Not a competitor in sight. And it looks to be a nice evening drive for Ouroboros to the checkered flag here in GT4. Langley with a little bit more traffic ahead before it is clean air to the finish. It's going to be the 15 pole sitting Porsche of Ricky Bobby, just caught up in that unfortunate contact early on in the race. It's going to be a pink pig versus a car that looks like a pink pig. One car that is a pink pig versus one car that looks like a pink pig. And if you don't know much about cars, you may be very, very confused. As Langley just a little bit more traffic to cycle through before it will be clear skies. Retrospectively, that is, for Langley. As that 296 of cash money did end up re-entering the pit lane and clearing that stop, but had to sacrifice some positions in doing so. Yakashokas, a few corners behind as we see Brute sliding that car. Big slide coming out of the exit of Goddard's. As Marvy also cycling through, but Marvy unable to make a mistake, currently is holding on to the podium in GT3, but Ingham in that Audi GT3 Evo is definitely close enough. One mistake from Marvy, and that would open up the door for Ingham to get that position back. As Langley heading down the hill towards the S's chicane. About 6.5 minutes left in this race. And once again, GoFAST Racing, a league that I will be doing some Monday night broadcasting with here in the future. Next week is the preseason of their official championship season. And then the week after that will be the official Race 1 first round of the Monday championship season. As Langley, with just a few laps left to go, is leading all on their lonesome. Same with Ouroboros in GT4. Has the Aston Martin GT3 of Marvy just behind. Marvy looking to cycle through past the GT4 traffic, but the GT4s definitely show to be a force to be reckoned with here in the wet. Ricky Bobby looking to move past Aeromidge here. As Mad Psycaster with Brad actually moving up, and it may have been a mistake from your mom that has closed up, or has actually reversed positions. Your mom in the Camaro was ahead of the Camaro of Brad, but now they have swapped. And Yaldara also looking to move up some positions as Brad allows the GT3 to make their way past at McLean. Christ QC serving their pit stop, getting that done as they are now rolling out of the pit, heading back onto the track. And Langley, with just a few laps left to go, pretty much has this one wrapped up. Sitting at the checkout counter just waiting in line, ready to bag this one up and take it home. Yakashoka's just a couple corners behind, but the gap has been steadily growing. Now Ingham does make it past the GT3 of Marvy. It must have been a mistake from Marvy because that gap was 10 seconds. And Marvy seems to be fighting for grip on the rear of that Aston Martin. The track does look a little bit flooded. The dry line, or the wet line as you would say, that was developed earlier seems to have been completely washed away. The track has been flooded. And Marvy does have a fighting chance at getting this position back, but does not seem to have the pace left in that car to hold on to that position. Ingham moves up into the podium in GT3. And a small group of GT4s here together on track. As Your Mom and Brute now in battle here. Your Mom in that black checkerboard Camaro, and the Brute in this gray and purple Camaro ZL1 GT4R. Very, very good looking car, and good sounding car that is. Don't see them used too much, especially here in the wet. But we've got a battle on our hands as we head up into Coppice. Brute sends it up the inside, clattering over the curbs, trying to get this position done, and does get that car fully ahead of Your Mom heading down to the S chicane. Brute will have to go defensive here as Your Mom looks to force the envelope for the move. Brute did have the position forward on track, and Your Mom backs out of the move, knowing that it would not be the smartest thing to do there heading down into the S chicane. And now Brute up ahead of Your Mom, just trying to hold on to that position for now. It is P6 in class, or P5 in class. The battle for P5. Langley still up, all on their lonesome. Yakashokas and Yaldara also still theoretically in battle, although it is not for position. And Ouroboros all alone at the front. No one around on track, essentially in no man's land. As Yakashokas and what looked to be the 18 of Yaldara still in battle. Langley still up ahead. And hopping back onto the battle between the GT4s here. As car number 305, Your Mom had an incident at the old hairpin and has opted to put that car back in the garage, take it on the trailer, and get out of here. Maybe time for some dry clothes, as it has been a wet one out here. But Brute assumes the position ahead of Your Mom and will have fifth place locked down, as we are now on the final lap of this race. Langley still your leader, up all on their own, coming through turns 1 and 2. Car number 25. It looked to be car number 25. That is car number 25 of Christ QC. Very, very heavy damage on that Mustang GT3. Would be very surprised if you can see out of that thing. That hood is in the suboptimal position of being up instead of down. And while the Mustangs do have a little bit of a tendency of falling apart, they usually do it on their own. That looks like it may have had a little bit of help. Langley, just a few corners left to go to take this win home in GT3. Ingham in P3 in GT3, as Langley will very shortly take the checkered flag, coming through the Melbourne hairpin. And then one more time out of Goddard's, and it will be Langley to take the win here at Donington Park. A very, very typical wet day here in the UK. And Langley takes home the win in GT3 Yakashokis in P2. And once Ouroboros makes their way around the track, they will take home the win in GT4. Yakashokis just a couple corners left to go. As Yakashokis does go very deep into Goddard's. I don't think there was anyone close enough to take that position away, but that would have been very unfortunate for Yakashokis. Comes across the line P2 in GT3. Ouroboros coming down the Starkey Straight, heading down toward the S's chicane. And one more time through Melbourne and Goddard's for Ouroboros to take home the GT4 win here in the GoFAST Racing League. And as Ouroboros comes around Goddard the final time, Ouroboros will take the checkered flag in GT4. Very masterclass drive for both class winners there and the podium of both classes. Ingham coming across the line P3 in GT3. Aeromich P2 in GT4. And I believe Mad Psycaster P3 in GT4. The order as they come across, for those who are still here: Ouroboros P1, Aeromich P2, Mad Psycaster P3, Brad P4, Brute P5, Your Mom P6, and Ormiston P7, Langley P1, Ingham P2, Marvey P3, as actually I believe it was Ingham P3, Yakashokis P2. And Ricky Bobby, your pole sitter, does end up taking the fastest lap by the end of the race, but was unable to finish in the podium. And that is going to be it tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to GoFAST Racing League for the opportunity to commentate. I understand it may have been a little bit short notice tonight, but I hope that all of you get a chance to check out the stream VOD. They will be uploaded both to Twitch and YouTube. And if you wouldn't mind, if you are not following, I would greatly appreciate it if you would give me that follow, especially if you want to support more GoFAST Racing League commentary. And if you would like to support me personally, the best way to do that would be to subscribe to the Twitch channel and subscribe to the YouTube channel. The Twitch channel and YouTube channel are both under the same name. And if you subscribe on Twitch, you get no ads at the beginning or any mid-roll ads that I may run. And it also throws a little bit of money your way. If you have Amazon Prime, you're able to do that for free. But if not, just a follow is good enough for me. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. It was a great race tonight, especially in the wet. And